Hello, everyone, and welcome to Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel, and I've got him all to myself here for the next hour. I'm going to include you in on this as well, as we kind of dive into everything going on around UGA recruiting. And Jeff, I got to tell you, I could not be more excited about this. The chance to really sort of keep our finger on the pulse of a program right now that's recruiting at a level that virtually no one has really seen in the SEC or in college football in recent years. This show, chronicling all of that, presented by Kroger, is going to be so much fun to do.
It's going to kind of feel like the Miss America pageant, Brandon. We're going to put out a lot of nice-looking contestants to become who's going to be coming down the line to be the next Georgia Bulldog. Lots of people, also representing a lot of different states these days for Georgia as well. Going to be a heck of a class to talk about. And Brandon, we start counting up all those 5 stars. I got a question for you, bud. Which one of those 5 stars that it's on the program now was the most unlikely 5-star to come to Georgia in your book?
You know, that's a great question. I guess if you want to start with that and start, talking that way, in a lot of ways it almost has to be John Emery Jr., the running back, because he comes from a state like Louisiana that is, a state that you don't think of players leaving very frequently, a position that Georgia's already stacked at. When you think about Emery's own comments here about depth charts being important, of the collection of 2019 5-stars, Emery in a lot of ways is probably that top name.
Kind of thought when you pull a guy like John Emery Jr. out of Louisiana, it's the Pelican State. Other folks know it as the Boot State, but you're talking about another 5-star running back to the University of Georgia. Simply put, when you ask him and his family about, hey, why Georgia? It's more like, why not Georgia? That family could not come up with a single negative or a single reason not to choose Georgia.
Yeah, so we'll obviously talk a lot about John Emery Jr. and a lot of the 5-star additions to Georgia's 2019 class throughout our program here today. They've added a lot of them recently. We're also going to take a lot of your comments here, and of course when Jeff Sintel does Facebook Lives and streaming video on YouTube and Twitter presented by Kroger, the one thing that we know is Jeff also includes giveaways. Today, no different. Jeff, tell the folks how today you and I are going to be giving away a gift card courtesy of Kroger here today.
Well, Brandon, I think the right thing to do here is maybe to let everybody know it's our first show, and we thank everybody for their patience here today. This is not going to be one of those brain busters. What we're going to do is we're going to listen really closely and watch really closely, and he and I will be of the same accord by the end of this show. The best question that is dropped right down below or right there along the comment section here for our Facebook Live feed. Top question of the day, we'll get a $50 gift card from Kroger, and those that know it on those that know it on Wednesday nights, they know that as the How About Them Groceries trivia card contest from Kroger.
So a lot of your questions and comments throughout our program here today, but let me start with this. You mentioned the tremendous haul of 5 stars that Georgia has for its 2019 class. In a lot of ways, this is in keeping for what Kirby Smart's been doing at Georgia since he took the job. His first recruiting cycle there in 2016. This is Kirby's 4th recruiting cycle on the job there. And one of the things that you've seen is the transformation that has taken place with the Georgia roster over the course of that time. Georgia now has 21 5-star players who are rated as a 5-star by at least one of the major recruiting services. 20 of those come to Georgia in Kirby Smart's tenure. In fact, I want to show you the list here of guys that Kirby Smart has added when it comes to 5-star signees. 2016, Kirby is a brand new coach, never coached a game before. He's a former defensive coordinator. He's working, double time as Alabama DC, Georgia head coach. Still brings in McCole Hardman, who is a 5-star on at least one designation, not of the 5-star tight end. Demetrius Robertson will sort of reclassify here because he chose Cal initially to sort of land back at Georgia as a transfer now. And then Ben Cleveland, the offensive lineman from part of that 2016 class that was a 5-star. And you think, that's pretty good for a coach in his first year on the job. And then wait till you see what Kirby Smart does in 2017. For a class that ends up being ranked number 3 in the composite 24/7 team rankings, Isaiah Wilson, who may be a starter at right tackle for Georgia this year, DeAndre Swift, the running back, D'Angelo Gibbs, who Georgia fans are sort of breathing a sigh of relief over because he seems to be back in good stead with the Dogs here this year. Richard LeCount, who's likely a starter for this season. Jake Fromm, who's a 5-star according to Scout.com and still the starting quarterback. And Robert Beal, who may have a chance to break out here this season. Number 3 overall for 2017, that's a lot of 5 stars. But then the coffers got incredibly full, Jeff, for 2018. When the dam truly broke open, Georgia becomes the #1 class in the country, unseating Alabama in that spot, a place the Crimson Tide had sort of considered to be a bit of its birthright, loading up on 5 stars that year. Huge laundry list of names here: Fields, Salyer, Mays, Anderson, Channing Tindall, Zamir White, Tyson Campbell, Brenton Cox, James Cook, Quay Walker. All of these guys had at least one 5-star designation according to the major recruiting services, and that adds up when you think about Terry Godwin, who was the 5-star that Kirby Smart inherits, to a lot of 5-star guys on one roster. So when you think about Georgia right now, Jeff, whether it be Kirby trying to recruit in this landscape where his roster is already pretty talented, and guys trying to fight for playing time, given there's so many 5-stars there. What does this mean for Georgia to have that much talent on the roster right now?
Well, I guess, Brandon, the first thing that pops in my head when you look at all that is, all these could be on any sort of service. That's Scout, 24/7 Sports, the Composite, Rivals, or ESPN. And there's some guys on those lists that maybe a lot of people don't know about or kind of forget. Robert Beal is one. He was on the ESPN list. Jake Fromm was actually on Scout.com. Ben Cleveland was only a 5-star on 24/7 Sports, but if you want to even goose the number up a little bit more, Brandon, the number is actually 22 when you count Jacob Eason under the banner of how many former 5-star recruits have chosen Georgia or eventually came to Georgia to play for this staff and to play for Kirby Smart. Now, all that's great, but I know a lot of fans here like to look towards the present and the future. It's simple, Brandon. When you've got 21 former 5-stars on the roster right now, and then you only have 85 scholarship slots, that's almost 1/5 of the roster that is a 5-star player. Not a 4-star, not a high 4-star, not a mid 4-star. We're talking about an elite prospect. And 2 points to ponder right here as well is when Georgia starts playing those SEC games, man, they're only going to be able to bring 70 of those guys on the road. So you very likely are going to see some very high echelon players, maybe some of even those 5-star recruits, especially with the new redshirt rules. Even with those new redshirt rules, that will not make the travel squad for the University of Georgia. And there's a little bitty nugget I got here for you too, Brandon, as well about that stat. Georgia, the number is 21 5-stars on the program. Next year they will lose one Terry Godwin, so that will go down to 20. They're likely to add at least 5 more in the 2019 class, but that will also mean the very next season in 2019, the Florida Gators will have 0 5-stars on their roster. And the University of Georgia, that bitter SEC East rival, will have somewhere around 25.
Yeah, it's a relevant topic when you look at the advantage that Georgia enjoys against its SEC East rivals right now. Florida program that you think of as the elite recruiting power for a long time. Georgia's obviously unseated them there. In Tennessee, with Jeremy Pruitt, a bit more of a recruited-minded head coach than Dan Mullen may be doing the same thing there to Florida. Tom Lavelle, though, watching us on Facebook, had an interesting question. He says, when you look at all these 5-star guys, what Georgia has, and we'll hold on to at least for another year here, and the spots that Georgia's trying to fill for 2019, where do you see the greatest collection of talent right now? And when you look at the places that most of these 5-stars sort of populate in terms of position groups, what does that mean for Georgia in terms of the balance of its current roster and what that means going forward?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Tom. I think the first thing to think about there is you got to look at the concentration about where the players are. I think the bushes are pretty thick when you look at linebacker for the University of Georgia, especially outside linebacker. The interior line, that's both offensive guard spots and the center position. When you look at a situation like offensive guard, for instance, you have a guy like Notori Johnson who redshirted last year, an Army All-American, and now he's got to sit there. If he wants to get to the playing time and get to a first-team spot, he's going to have to beat out sophomores Solomon Kinley, Justin Schaefer, Ben Cleveland. He's also going to have to beat out the 2 top guards in the country in Trey Hill and Jamari Salyer from a year ago. Lots of positions, and I do believe Kirby Smart when he said special teams are going to be key, like he said in his opening press briefing when he told the players, when he first met the players before the outset of fall camp. He showed them clips of Reuben Foster. He showed them clips of Sony Michel. He showed them clips of a lot of talented players, some of the best players in college football. And those guys were not starting as freshmen. Those guys made special teams tackles, and then they went on to become a future first-round draft pick in the NFL. Leonard Fournette is another one of those guys. You're going to see special team Bulldogs a lot, and I got a little game out there for dog fans. When you see a punt team, when you see a kick team, when you see a kickoff team, I think it's going to be an interesting little mini game inside the football game to count all of those 5-star players that the Georgia Bulldogs will have out there on that field.
That's Jeff Sintel. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. I appreciate Oseret Legama, and I hope I pronounced that name correctly, weighing in on our YouTube comment section, who mentioned all the other folks watching right now. Y'all better hit that like button, and we'd certainly appreciate that. The thumbs up, the like, give us comments. We want to be a part of this recruiting conversation with you, and we'll do it every Wednesday afternoon for the next however long it takes to cover everything going on with UGA recruiting every week here at this time. We'll look forward to doing Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, with you. Glad to be a part of that on the program. By the way, speaking of Kroger, this Friday and Saturday, Kroger's got great deals. You can pick up a 10-pack of Capri Suns and an 8-count of Go-Gurts. This is like the perfect thing for my family. My son loves the Capri Suns. My daughter, who's 3, loves the Go-Gurts. You can get them both for just 99 cents. It's perfect for back-to-school lunches. You can download coupons starting today through August 11th and redeem Friday and Saturday in stores at your local Kroger there. So a really cool way to celebrate back to school with Kroger. And Jeff, for the people who are just joining us right now, remind folks once again that speaking of Kroger, you will be giving away a How About Them Groceries Kroger gift card here today. You're looking for the best question or comment. We'll announce that later on. Someone's going to be a big winner here today.
Yeah, that's what we do. We find you somewhere on social media through Facebook. But somewhere over the duration of this program, Brandon and I will get together, we'll huddle up, and we'll say that was the question of the day for our very first edition of Before the Hedges here in the afternoon time slot with the Daily Llama right here. and what we're going to do is we're going to pick the top question, and somebody's going to get a $50 gift card from Kroger. How about them groceries? And maybe they're going to get an 8-pack of Go-Gurts. Maybe they're going to get an 8-pack of 5-stars like Georgia and Kirby Smart have been doing lately.
Well, speaking of that, if you've been kind of away for the summer, haven't been fully plugged into UGA recruiting, my, oh my, you have missed a lot. Georgia's been quite a run here in the month of July and August. In fact, let me show you this, just how much recruiting work Georgia's done since basically about the midpoint in July, virtually almost, at least seemingly, finishing off the lion's share of its 2019 class. Here's what's happened for Georgia since July 15th when Zion Logue, by the way, a guy we're going to hear from a little bit later on our program, when Zion Logue made his commitment on July 15th, the floodgates open. The big offensive tackle, Warden McClendon, followed not too long after that. Then the rich prize of the 5-star defensive lineman, one of the very top players in the state of Georgia, Trayvon Walker, came in on July 24th. July 29th was an especially good day for the Dogs. John Emery Jr., who we mentioned off the top of our program, Rian Trouble Davis, and Micaiah Tongue, the great-looking athlete who may start his career at Georgia at the wide receiver position. All 3 committed on July 29th. And then the nation's, number 1 junior college linebacker Jermaine Johnson made it official for UJ on August 2nd. What is that? 7 commits for Georgia since July 15th. What an amazing run for the Dogs. A lot of this, Jeff, as you know, centering around the reveal of the the opening of the brand new West End Zone facility, but an incredible run there for UJ over the course of that time.
So, Brendan, the main thing that jumps out to me is I'm looking at that list and kind of cataloging everything, and it looks to me when you got that class now, and also you need to add another guy. They probably have 18 commitments right now with the news that's came out, and that was reported first by 24/7 Sports about how Tramel Walthor currently goes up on their commitment board right now because they feel he's in another Devontae Wyatt type situation where he just needs to maintain a 2.5 and a B average this fall semester because he was already a full qualifier, and then he can return to the University of Georgia where he committed to. I will say I'm intrigued to see what happens there because right now Georgia, to me, it looks like I'm reading a 22-chapter book, and it looks like Georgia, even given the silent commitments and the public commitments, it looks like Georgia's probably knocked off about 20 chapters of that 22-chapter book right now, and wonder what would happen if an ideal 5-star target wants to join the program. Now, obviously, there's a recruiting benefit to retain Tramel Walthor because he counted for the class of 2018, and he's not going to count twice under the NCAA's mandate, so it's almost like a scholarship that won't go against the 85-man limit or the 85 across 5 years. So that'll be interesting to right there where Tramel Walthor ends up putting Georgia in its class of 2019. But You look there at that list, and here's my big one, Brandon. I look at that list and I said, all right, this is probably the number one target at the very top of the board. And at one time that was Trayvon Walker. Yep. Boom, check that guy off. And then to me, I kind of thought internally Georgia's biggest remaining target was John Emery Jr., one of those 5-star running backs, because this is the University of Georgia. They want to add a lot of those show dogs to their backfield. And then boom, John Emery Jr. comes around on July the 29th. And then for me, the biggest remaining target, especially because of his skill set, was the junior college linebacker Jermaine Johnson. Yeah. He's about 6'6". He's about 245, 250 pounds. His Independence Community College coaches have even dabbled with using him as a safety because he has the length, he has the size, kind of much like Georgia did with Lorenzo Carter as well during some of their schemes in 2017. And I'm going to say this, and I don't think I'm going to have a lot of egg on my face as I say that. He is going to remind a lot of folks of Lorenzo Carter from the jump at the University of Georgia when he arrives. Might even be a go-gurt or two more athletic than one even Zoe Carter, which is saying quite a lot.
Yeah, for me, when I look at that recent collection of UGA commits, I think the two names obviously jump off the page to me. John Emery, who just saw some great highlights from, going back to his career that's been sterling in the state of Louisiana, and also Trayvon Walker. Those are the two big bold print names that for me jump off that list, although there's plenty to like about Rian Davis and Jermaine Johnson and a lot of other names there. But for me, it's Emery and Walker, and it's for two different reasons. For me, Trayvon Walker is all about the immediate need. Georgia needs elite defensive linemen. Not just bodies that fill up depth, but guys that are potentially game changers. And with Walker, do you talk about him as a 5 technique, someone that lines up outside the offensive tackle, or a 3 technique, someone who's kind of a little bit more towards the inside? Like a lot of Georgia defensive linemen, he may be able to do both. But either way, it's potentially an immediate need, at least by his sophomore season at Georgia. But for John Emery Jr., it's a different kind of thing. For John Emery Jr., all of a sudden it becomes that lineage of Georgia is the place that elite running backs choose to go. And so when you start looking ahead, not just to 2020 and 21, but 2022 and 2023, if Jeff and I are lucky and blessed enough to still be doing that kind of talk then, when you've really planted your flag as Keith Marshall, Todd Gurley, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, John Emery Jr., DeAndre Swift, when you're collecting running backs like that, all of a sudden it becomes really almost like an inheritance for you to be first in line to get the next guy. There is a potential ricochet for Emery's commitment that could benefit Georgia for years and years to come.
Brandon, I think folks need to recognize this, especially about the running back position. Those would be Dell McGee's show dogs at the University of Georgia, or those end zone stalkers, as he likes to call them on social media. Think about this for a second. Even you, that knowledgeable Georgia Bulldog fan, I want you to think about the last 8 or 9 running backs that have really starred for the University of Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I want you to even move it forward this year with a James Cook and with a Zamir White, and then maybe even next year with a John Emery Jr. If you sit there and you look at them, put them all up on the whiteboard, whatever you want to do, there's just one homegrown Georgia guy in the mix there, and that would be Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
You look at it, look at all these names. DeAndre Swift, Pennsylvania. John Emery Jr., Louisiana. James Cook, Florida. Zamir White, North Carolina. John Emery Jr., Louisiana. Todd Gurley, North Carolina. Keith Marshall, North Carolina. Yeah. Sony Michel, Florida. Anybody that doesn't think Georgia is a national brand when it comes to recruiting, they're fooling themselves, because Georgia, now that they can pair up the 5-star running back with 5-star offensive linemen in front of them, and nobody's tires are going to get too nicked up at the University of Georgia with 40-carry games like Nick Chubb had a few years ago against Mizzou. This is an enviable way to facilitate your professional career by toting the ball for the University of Georgia.
Let me preview a couple things coming up on our program here today. I mentioned a moment ago that later on we're going to actually hear a great interview that Jeff did with one of the recent UGA commits, the defensive lineman Zion Logue. We'll hear that on our program. Also, we're going to get a chance to hear from a guy who's making his college decision next Thursday. It's the junior college defensive back, DJ Daniel. A lot of Georgia fans crossing their fingers on Daniel's decision next week. We'll get a preview of that with a great interview that Jeff also did with DJ Daniels. That's all on the way coming up here tonight on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. But let me go back to our comment section for a moment. Zach Smith, weighing in on Facebook, said, when you look at that list of commits we just showed, when you think about how they all kind of fit together for that 2019 class for UGA, is it too simple to say Dell McGee is once again sort of the reigning king of Georgia recruiting here? Which of these Georgia assistants, and I thought this is a great question from Zach Smith, which of these Georgia assistants here do you sort of look at as the one that's sort of taken home the trophy for this season in terms of those great additions that he's made to that 2019 class?
Man, that is a gully washer of a question. I think the thing I liked about, and I guess everybody's noticing this now with both Sam Pittman and Dale McGee. Now, to me, it's one of those two guys, because not only do they get their guys, not only do they go out of state, but the other thing they do, Brandon, is they're like that kid in the classroom who finishes up the final exam with an hour left to go, and everybody else is scrambling trying to get their answers and everything figured out. Look at this. Dell McGee's got his running back already, much like last year. Sam Pittman, the same thing with his offensive lineman. Maybe it's a Clay Webb at the very end with Georgia, but both of these guys, their targets are established, their relationships are set, and it would not shock me at all for the biggest targets for Georgia to have, for either of those gentlemen on their recruiting territories, to both be done by December, because that's how they roll.
Over on YouTube on this same subject, Jawan Smith says, Coach Pittman's the best recruiter on this staff. And you mentioned Clay Webb. That's a name that Georgia's going to chase after here in the sort of final stage of the 2019 class. That's a real, whatever the opposite of position of need is, sort of an embarrassment of riches, interior offensive lineman for Georgia is an example of that. I mean, if somehow a Clay Webb or maybe even a Harry Miller, whose name's kind of out there, if Pittman could find a way to pull one of them, at that point in time, Jawan Smith may truly be correct with his comment that even in comparison to a Glenn Schumann and a Dan Lanning and a Dell McGee, guys who've had great success, at that point in time, maybe Sam Pittman does take the crown again.
Well, I love that question because it really makes you think, and I just start going through my process here. Who's the marquee, bullet point, top of the resume recruit for both of these guys from a recruiting standpoint? I think John Emery Jr. was pretty big there. I think James Cook, pulling the brother of the FSU all-time leading rusher, James Cook, to Georgia is also another impressive feat. And then you think about Sam Pittman going into the state of New York, pulling out Isaiah Wilson, when really, folks, that was one of those that even the leaned-in guys didn't really see that coming until maybe about a week prior to what was happening there at Georgia. And everybody's never going to forget that Christmas pageant. But then look what Sam Pittman did in 2018. He had a double barrel of Bulldogs. He had the number one offensive guard, and usually that's enough for any school. But he goes and doubles down and gets the number 2 offensive guard as well. He gets a top 5 center. That was a Georgia boy. And then he goes out to Rhode Island, of all places, and gets the highest rated prospect ever in the history of Rhode Island in Xavier Truss. 6'7", about 345, 350 pounds, and then takes away family from Brian McClendon in South Carolina and gets a longtime Georgia legacy, Warren McClendon, to come in. And one other thing that you're hearing when you have your ear to the ground about Georgia and those practices and those early practices is that young man, Owen Condon, that 3-star tackle, the lowest rated tackle for Georgia in the class of 2018. Turning some heads already.
Absolutely. That's Jeff Sintel. I'm Brandon Adams. This is Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. It's great to have you with us, and hope you'll be with us every Wednesday afternoon for a lot of recruiting talk presented by Kroger. By the way, speaking of Jeff Sintel, 98 Sports Talk watching in our YouTube comment section, congratulating you, complimenting you on the tie. You always find a way to make me look bad. First of all, I can't compete with this face as it is, this handsome face. It's something I can't even begin to compete with. And then you go up and show me up and you wear the tie. You're making me look bad.
Brandon, my papa always used to say, show up in the room like you're dressed for business and people will know that you're taking it seriously. No matter what you say, that was my grandpa Hurtis's best advice, and I do. When something matters to me and something's important, I'm going to dress the part.
There you go. That's pretty good advice. See, you thought you were coming for recruiting talk, and you end up getting a nice piece of life advice there as well, so take that to heart here. By the way, we appreciate your comments. We'll look forward to taking a lot more of those over the course of our time. And don't forget, as Jeff said, we're actually going to pick a lucky commenter here tonight, this afternoon, and you're going to walk away with a winner of our Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. So we're looking forward to giving that away a little bit later on. Now, speaking of comments, Kevin Blackman, who weighed in a little earlier on our Facebook comment section, was saying, all right, Jeff, you got to tell us, who is the next one to commit? And one of the things I love, because I've been a long-time watcher of Jeff Sintel's Facebook Lives here, I'm actually now getting a chance to sit next to him at the desk, and I always love this question because I don't care how many recruits Georgia just got, there's always the question of, now who's going to be next? And that's what Kevin Blackman wants to know. So with that in mind, here we've kind of put together a little graphic of some of the potential suggestions, and we want you to tell us which of these names, I guess, are most likely to sort of finish off those final spots for the 2019 class. We mentioned DJ Daniel. We'll hear from him a little bit later on. He's one of those guys that could be in this class. He'll announce on August 16th. Tyreek Stevenson is another big-time defensive back. Somebody talked earlier in our comment section about the work that James Coley's done as a UGA recruiter. I think you would probably agree that Coley's potentially instrumental in Stevenson's decision here. Kair Elam, and I'm sure I just totally butchered that name.
Kair.
Yeah, that's sort of a tradition, me butchering these recruits' names the first go-around. Kair Elam, another 4-star to think about. Then you get to Nakobe Dean, a guy I've asked you about a million times, the 5-star linebacker from Mississippi. Lewis Seen, the 4-star safety from Texas. Tamon Mitchell, who you kind of introduced us to at Dog Nation a couple of weeks ago. The aforementioned Clay Webb, the big-time center from Oxford, Alabama. Thought to be an Alabama lean at one point. Maybe Georgia working to change that. And then I'll correct myself on my graphic here. Defensive lineman Chris Hinton, the 5-star from Greater Atlanta Christian, currently a Michigan commit. And here's what I'm going to tell you, Jeff, even though this is supposed to be a question for you, I'm going to give you my own answer to my own question. The most exciting name for me on that list is Chris Hinton, and given the fact that he's been tied to Michigan as a commit, maybe he feels like one of the longer shots on that board. What do you think of that list of names, and where do you put Hinton on that list?
Well, I think Hinton is one of those things that probably is one of those packages that says do not open until Christmas. Maybe you're going to have to see a lot of things happen in Georgia's season, Michigan's season perhaps. Everyone is probably pretty astute to look at that Michigan schedule this year and see some treacherous games for the Wolverines, like Nebraska. They've got Michigan State. They've got Notre Dame on the mix. Don't forget Penn State. Don't forget Wisconsin, and also don't forget Ohio State. And they're really going to bank a lot on Shea Patterson, the 5-star quarterback. Most thought he was maybe a buttered biscuit, a little bit better than Jacob Eason in the class of 2016 as far as a quarterback. You saw that at Ole Miss last year. And what happens there if the walls fall off Michigan? Maybe Patterson can't go a couple of games. Maybe they lose a squeaker to maybe Notre Dame, or maybe they lose one of those big games to Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. Very interesting there for Michigan. And, you know, a lot of people are going to look at that board, and I hope you're going to draw away a couple things right there. Number one, if you're trying to be a recruiting reporter and have your pulse on the heartbeat of Georgia recruiting, you're going to need some frequent flyer miles to do that, because there are not a lot of Georgia targets in there at all, not a lot of in-state targets there at all. In fact, if you look at that, what could happen there with the eventual close to the Georgia class, it's no secret right now. I wrote about it today in the Intel that the majority of the Georgia class this year is actually out-of-state guys, and I see that trend continuing. And if you really want to burrow down deep into that and start thinking what's going to happen there for Georgia, you clearly see that the secondary, the defensive back spot, those interchangeable secondary defensive backs, can the cornerback play safety? Can he play a nickel? That's what Georgia's looking for there. You have a prevalence of defensive guys on the side of the ball, and the closest I'll come to any answer about the next Georgia Bulldog to commit, you probably want to look in that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Probably even want to look at the secondary spot as well, because let's face it, if Georgia has 6 or 7 maybe targets left in the class of 2019, a lot of that, little side road here, is going to depend on how many guys might go pro, might be attrition on the roster as well. But if you look at the bulk of the majority of the close to the Georgia class, looks like defense, and it also looks like in the secondary.
I have got a lot of good comments coming in on this subject. Would you mind if I read you a few on this issue here?
Maybe they can get the Kroger $50 how about them groceries.
You never know. Alexander Rain weighing in on these defensive backs. Kair Elam, Tyreek Stevenson, DJ Daniel. Do we know? I mean, for me, I've always assumed that Stevenson was the highest priority of that trio. Compare Elam to Stevenson for a moment. Mention DJ Daniel is obviously, a little older here, brings a little bit different skill set to the table. Do we have a established pecking order between these defensive backs? Keep in mind that Andrew Booth recently committed to Clemson. That was a guy that most people thought was sort of trending away from Georgia for a while. But of these guys who are available on the board, can you compare Stevenson to Elam to Daniel? How do they all compare to each other?
Well, it's going to be one of those traditional Wednesday Night Live, probably 30-second answers when I know people would like a 10-second answer. The quick hiccup answer I'm going to give is I think the top of the board at DB is probably going to be DJ Daniel and then Tyreek Stevenson. If you look at how they're rated by the recruiting industry, Kair Elam is actually the highest rated guy there. Kair's a guy out of Palm Beach. The Benjamin School looked fantastic out of the opening when I got to see him. Had a good conversation with him as well in Texas and also recently. But I do think Elam is a guy, number 7 cornerback nationally, but also you have to look at Tyreek Stevens, nation's number 9 cornerback as well. Both of these guys are top 75 prospects. Tyreek seems to me the biggest. He's about 6'1", about 205 pounds. Very adaptable. Is he a safety? Heck yeah, he could be a safety. Is he a corner? Heck yeah, he could be a corner as well. But then you also got to remember DJ Daniel. DJ Daniel's a guy that Georgia looked at, and they're like, junior college guys, we don't know, 1 to 2 years. We don't want them. We want them in our system. We want to coach them up. We want Brandon Adams down there in Dog Nation Daily to be foaming at the mouth for him for a little bit. Don't want to do a JUCO guy. And then they watch him work, and then they watch him run. And then they see he's about 6 feet and about 190 pounds, not afraid to stick his neck in there and get physical like Georgia likes with physicality and composure, and Georgia makes the quick assessment. I'm not going to take JUCO guys, but we got to take this JUCO guy.
And we'll see what he does on August 16th, and we'll hear from DJ Daniel a little bit later on our program. Ace Caniford also asking about Clay Webb, who you mentioned, comparing him to Harry Miller, who is currently an Ohio State commit, but if you've read the papers, you know that things in Columbus, Ohio, not great these days. Maybe Miller's reconsidering that decision. If you want to do a side-by-side challenge, sort of a comparison between Clay Webb and Harry Miller, Ace here is asking, how do you make that comparison, and is there one that George would prefer over the other here? We know, based on some of the reporting you've done, Harry Miller's done some great mission work. He's a true team captain every sense of the word. It seems almost impossible to imagine Georgia could go into Alabama and get a guy like Clay Webb. But as Eric Smith said in the YouTube comment section a moment ago, who couldn't Georgia get if they really wanted him? And maybe that's Clay Webb, the latest example of that.
Well, the way I look at that, man, is I think Georgia, should they go in either way, Harry Miller or Clay Webb, that is a recruiting luxury item for them right now. Clay Webb he's been one of the best centers in the country for the last 3 or 4 years. He's dominating at the opening. I've seen him plenty of times do that. Harry Miller, though, the valedictorian at Buford, current Ohio State commitment.
And by the way, Buford is a very tough school to be a valedictorian at. That's very near where I lived and grew up for a long time. That's a tough school to be valedictorian.
34, 35 on his ACT. Anybody that sees that transcript looks at him and say, well, if there's a 6-star student athlete, that guy would be Harry Miller. I'm still gonna continue to be the pump the brakes guy here a lot about Harry Miller. I just don't see him. Number one, I think the most likely scenario is Urban Meyer stays. He stays at Ohio State. Let's say Urban Meyer goes. I think he would stay at Ohio State provided they hire the right fit and he likes the way that things are going to that program. He's just a guy that to me does not seem to attach to worldly things and fickle things. And he realizes that his college career is going to be what he makes of it. But then in the event that he does decide to back up and back off his recruiting, I don't even think Georgia's the primary contender there. I think that contender would be Stanford.
I want to talk to you about a lot of the work that Georgia's doing out of state right now. Before that, let me get one more comment here. And speaking of out of state targets, Lewis Seen, the big-time safety from the great Trinity program there in the state of Texas, Jeff Hensley asking in our comment section that if the door opens for Lewis Seen, does the Sanders family also walk through that as well? Shedeur Sanders, others, all of a sudden, if you can get Lewis Seen in Georgia's 2019 class, does that create that pipeline for that great power out in the state of Texas, much like Georgia and others have tried to establish the same kind of thing with a program like IMG Academy in Florida? Is Lewis Seen a gateway for Georgia for other elite recruits from that great program there at Texas?
Well, I think it's a nice maybe cherry on the top of this sundae, or maybe, Brandon, it's your seasoning on top of your Marco's pizza or your favorite lane at Kroger while you're sitting there shopping and you go from Crowbar to the deli or whatever. Lewis Seen is a connected recruit. He's at Trinity Christian. That's the program that's kind of manned or shepherded a little bit by one Deion Primetime Sanders. And, you know, Brent, I want to make sure truth in advertising happens right here. You know, you talked about sometimes things would spill over onto this show even before they see the pages of DogNation.com. Had a recent conversation with Shedeur Sanders, the 6'1", 195-pound son of Deion Sanders, quarterback, led his team to a state championship as a freshman. Returning as a sophomore, just took a tremendous visit to Georgia. Know a lot about Shedeur Sanders and his decision right now. He tells me that the two guys he patterns his game after right now would be one, Tom Brady.
Okay. Wow.
The second one, I want you to just try and guess this one, my friend. Who would be the second guy he patterns his game after?
That's a great question. Drew Brees, I don't know.
Justin Fields.
Wow, how about that? That's quite a compliment.
Justin Fields.
Quite a compliment.
Shedeur Sanders are already getting close, at least social media text message close. And Shedeur Sanders told me that Georgia doesn't know about when he'll decide, doesn't have a top schools, whatever. But if he had to find a school to him which felt the closest like home, that right now to him is the University of Georgia.
A couple names I could have put on that graphic and didn't. They're committed to other places. Quashawn Fuller, Derek Rambo Hunter, both to Florida State, but they're both guys that I really like. Hunter I especially like. He recently committed to Florida State, kind of raised some eyebrows when he did. Where do those defensive linemen fit into a discussion like this?
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys, and this is how stacked the Georgia class is. The spots will be at a premium. And I look, Brandon, at a guy like those guys, Derek Hunter, Quashawn Fuller. You could even put in Cam Smith, the defensive back out of South Carolina.
Yeah, that's another good name.
You can roll in
good name.
Cortez Andrews, who's likely to be deciding sometime very shortly. Georgia, the recruiting is just so bountiful right now. But a guy like me, my own interpretation is those guys are probably keep the home fire burning, back burner guys. And in case something pops and they need to go find another name, that's a very good short list of kind of understudy candidates for Georgia's 2019 class.
Is it too early to start talking about guys like Zach Pickens maybe, getting involved here, Nathan Pickering getting involved here? Are those names too early to discuss in a conversation like this?
You want those too, right, Brandon?
I want them all.
Okay.
I want them all.
I want Brandon's answer within 5 seconds. Who is the 1 5-star you wish to flip, not named Andrew Booth? And then everybody else out there as well. Out of all those 5-star, high-hanging fruit, definitely not low-hanging fruit, Nathan Pickering, Zach Pickens, Chris Hinton, and even an uncommitted guy like Clay Webb, who do you want?
See, for me, it's Hinton because I also now get in the door with Miles Hinton for the class of 2020, I guess, on Miles Hinton. So one Hinton begats another Hinton. All of a sudden, that's how I stay in business here if I'm the University of Georgia. I like 5-star recruits that bring other elite recruits with them. And then with Chris Hinton's case, that may be – I know the recruitment will be independent, but I do really like that.
Yeah, this is a show where we don't want to have to look back on maybe 6 months from now and throw egg on our face with like one of those clips or whatever. I'm going to say this. I know we don't talk about 2020 a lot, and we will not be the asinine podcasters, broadcasters right here that will stream what's wrong with Georgia's class of 2020 recruiting, especially since they only have 2 commitments right there. But if you want to see about an encore for Sam Pittman, number 1 guard, number 2 guard in 2018.
Oh, yeah.
What, maybe just maybe, if Georgia finds a way to get to Miles Hinton in the class of 2020. Think about Broderick Big Silly Jones as well. What's more impressive than the nation's top 2 guards?
Yeah.
What about 2 of the nation's top 3 tackles? Top 3 offensive tackles in the class of 2020 for Georgia. Name like Tate Ratledge to think about as well. What about a name like Justin Rogers at offensive guard as well? What if the 2020 recruiting class for Georgia ends up being the drop the microphone class for even a dude like an Uber recruiter like Sam Pittman?
It is a lot to think about. Great stuff there from Jeff Sintel. Good to have with us on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Coming up in just a moment, I want to give you an update. Use the word podcast. Makes me think to remind. I've got some news to give you on how you can find Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, as a podcast. I'll tell you about all of that. We're going to hear from DJ Daniel, a great interview that you did with him, foreshadowing and previewing his commitment decision coming up next week. Before that, though, let me squeeze in one more thing here. I love, as a Georgia fan, you see I got the Georgia G on my clothes here today, by the way, courtesy of the UJ bookstore. So I love, all these big names we're talking about here, but I do notice, as what you just said a moment ago, these are out-of-state names. Now, I've said, and I've mentioned this to you over and over again, all things being equal, if you're giving me a 5-star here or a 5-star there, I'd rather have the 5-star from the state of Georgia because I just feel like there's a compound interest that you collect when you recruit elite players in your own state. Now, that's when all things are being equal. If they're not equal, I want the better player no matter where he's from. But is there even a modicum, if that's the correct word, is there even a modicum of concern that Georgia's doing most of this work out of state? Tyreek Stevenson's a great defensive back. Georgia may get him. He's from South Florida. A guy an hour from campus is going to Clemson. Is there any reason to be concerned that even with an elite class, it's elite class from around the country as opposed to a whole bunch of guys from inside the Peach State?
Well, Brandon, here's what I did. I've kind of educated my thought process on this because this is simply a new era of Georgia football, especially in recruiting. You'd asked me 2 years ago, Brandon, I would have said, if you're going to tell me I can have the number one player in Vermont or the number one player in Maryland, or you could have that kid from Vidalia who will not be able to show his face when he goes home should the Bulldogs lose to Georgia Tech or Florida or even Tennessee, that will be ingratiated and that rivalry will just be woven into every fiber of his being. But that was the old Georgia, man. The new Georgia is they simply go out and get the very best players out there they simply want. And everybody says Andrew Booth. Everybody looks at some of those other top defensive backs or some of those other top prospects in the state of Georgia. But what if it is like that family household where the mom or the lady of the household, the CEO of the grocery bill, just likes the Kroger brand a little bit better than the national brand? It is in the eye of the beholder right there. And what Georgia's doing right there is they're going out for the very best players, because Georgia can now get the very best player in Louisiana, the very best player in Rhode Island, the very best player in Pennsylvania, and his cousin who's also the second best player in Pennsylvania. They can get the top player in North Carolina. They can get the 5-star cornerback out of South Florida and do it again the next year perhaps. Georgia's just recruiting at a different level, and the way this coaching staff gets on those guys, where the culture of competition is so stressed that the guy that rises to the top of that talented depth chart is going to deserve it, and he's going to earn it, and he's going to be a warrior on Saturdays.
This Friday and Saturday at Kroger, you can pick up a 10-pack of Capri Sun and an 8-count of Go-Gurts for just 99 cents. It's perfect for the back-to-school lunches. I've got 2 kids on their way back to school here this month, and they're going to love both of those things. You will as well. You can download coupons starting today. It can be redeemed on Friday and Saturday at your local Kroger. We, of course, appreciate Kroger bringing Before the Hedges to us each and every week here on the Dog Nation video channels. Thank you all so much for being a part of it. As I mentioned a moment ago, this show also going to be available as a podcast as well. Now, for those of you that listen on podcast or the Apple Podcast player, it's going to take a little while to get the podcast up into the Apple Podcast player, but it'll be recorded as a podcast today. We'll have it up on SoundCloud. I'll give out links for how you can find that. We'll post the show at dognation.com as well. And then over the course of time, hopefully by next week, sometimes this can take a couple weeks though, we'll be up on the Apple Podcast player and the other podcast channels. You can find Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. We'd love to have you be a part of that. And in our comment section here, real quick before we hear from DJ Daniel, Robert Barnes says, can y'all please be on time next week? Waiting for this show is like waiting for the first game. Yes, Robert, we're going to get that time locked in and be ready to go. We appreciate you being with us on the program today. Also appreciate the kind words over here in the YouTube comment section. We're talking about how now we have 6 weekly shows here from Dog Nation, being podcast and video 5 times a week for Dog Nation Daily. And of course now every single week we've got Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. And of course some great stuff coming from Chip Towers and Mike Griffith in Athens as well. It's going to be a great season here around Dog Nation, and we're really excited about having you be a part of that. Now, as promised, I want to give you a chance to hear from one of the guys that has been mentioned on this program already this afternoon, and one of the guys that could become a pivotal member of someone's class in 2019. A lot of Georgia fans, after seeing his film, hope it's UGA. He's DJ Daniel, a terrific defensive back who could be making a choice Georgia fans could be very happy with next week. As a preview of that choice, let's hear Jeff Sintel with DJ Daniel right now.
How has Georgia let you know that you're kind of a wanted man? I mean, I don't think they really wanted to take JUCO corners, but then they saw you, and then what did they tell you afterward?
Just being on, if we're going JUCO, we wanted to play now. I wanted to play now. When I could just get a freshman, and they can have all 4 years. So just being JUCO, I know they really want me to play now.
What about the pull to South Carolina? That was the first school to offer you. I think T-Rob was here at this very field. He saw you and he offered you. What do you really like about South Carolina that gives them a shot?
Coaching staff, the love I get. That's what the first SEC school to offer me. Coach T-Rob, talk to him every day. Great guy. I feel like we built a bond together. So that's really about it.
The opportunity you might have at Georgia. What's the best thing you like about Georgia?
Just the love, the communication. Not just with me. They talk more to my family than me. So I just know it's just love there, and just being straightforward to me.
What's the relationship like with Kirby and Mel? Those are the guys that recruit you, or who are the other guys that are recruiting you?
Coach Dan Lennon, Coach Rambo, and Coach Nick. Coach Dan Lennon, that's my guy. We talk every day. He talked to my grandma. Same with Coach Rambo, same with Coach Nick. I met them all of my visits, and I feel like I got a bond with them.
What's ultimately going to make your decision, DJ? What's it all going to come down to, you think?
Just family, praying to God, and scheme-wise.
What's something about you aside from the football field people don't know about you? What do you like off the field? What's important to you? What matters to you?
Family. I always talk to my mom every day, talk to my grandma every day, and just my uncle. Being I just didn't have the father figure, just my uncle, being there every step of the way. I really appreciate him.
Awesome. Hey, DJ, man, thanks for your time. Beautiful day here in Milledgeville. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
So really fascinating stuff there with DJ Daniel, the junior college defensive back from Georgia Military College, who will make his choice next week. And a lot to like about Daniel, both as a player, and we've seen his film, including some video of him running the 40 there before he spoke, but also a lot to like about him as a person. It's kind of interesting to see how he kind of fits into the future, if he were to commit to Georgia, the future of the Georgia defensive back room, where you really are going to start seeing a lot more safeties who sort of look more like cornerbacks. You know, take Richard LeCount on this year's team, for instance, a guy that certainly packs a wallop like a safety, but he's going to be expected to run like cornerbacks do, much like, say, you know, some of the other, you know, top players we've seen in the SEC as of late. How does Daniel fit into that mold?
I think what Georgia's looking for there, Brandon, and I think all of college football is looking for, is I call them the Swiss Army knives. I use that term a lot because they want that adaptable secondary guy. Gus Malzahn, Lincoln Riley, you want to go tempo? You want to hit us with the run game? You want to hit us with the throw game? Georgia would like to employ nickel packages, dime packages, quarter packages of defensive backs that can do the following: run, cover, hit, ball skills. The definition of the position will be blurred at the University of Georgia. They want to keep guys on the field that can do it all and do it all very well.
Now, James Crump in our comment section on Facebook feeling pretty confident that DJ Daniel's going to choose UGA next week. We'll find about that. Miriam Martin Corbin in our Facebook comment section says Daniel will be a great addition to the program. Joy Stripling also says that defensive back probably the biggest position of need. And you can obviously debate that between defensive line and, you know, obviously there's a lot to be said on both sides of that. But when I look at the current roster and in terms of what's national championship level, the one position group I probably have the most questions about currently on this current roster about being at the national championship standard, it may be defensive back. And there are plenty of guys who this season are going to have their chance to show up and shine. We may feel very differently come December and January than we do right now. But for me right now, I don't think that Joy's wrong about this. That defensive back is one of those final position groups in terms of being a bit of a holdout, in terms of being at that Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama level. It's one of those final frontiers for Georgia, is it not?
I got a few, Brandon, and I'm going to just look at them from an on the field and also potential and also present status. I think defensive line especially is still one of those, especially next 1 to 2 years. I also feel that wide receiver is that position, especially if Demetrius Robertson is not eligible for 2018. A lot of the tea leaves say he very well might be, but if he is eligible, I think that elevates Georgia's receiver group to a national championship level. Certainly they'll get there in 2019 when they add a couple of 5-stars. But to me, I do double down and agree with you on the defensive back spot for really one simple reason, is I'm looking way, way ahead, which no one should ever do in the game of football because personnel, things can very much change. But the eventual zero-sum game, the two biggest kids on the block, like that great movie Red Dawn they quoted at, you got the two biggest kids on the block. Sooner or later they're going to fight. Sooner or later Georgia's going to meet up with Alabama. My personal opinion right now is I don't think Georgia has a stable of defensive backs that can cover all those receivers at Alabama at this time.
Let me follow up on one more thing on DJ Daniel. Michael Morrow and Arlen Block both mentioning this in our YouTube comment section. The role that UGA staffer and former UGA player Bakari Rambo is playing in all of this.
Yeah, Rambo is a guy. Nick Williams is another guy that probably doesn't get enough headline attention as far as their daily grind of an effort, yeoman efforts in terms of not just being that marquee assistant coach with the big paycheck, recruiting these guys, but they're working really hard. And sometimes it's even just as an effective a recruiting pitch because that's coming from a former Georgia Bulldog that can say, hey, this is how it was when I was here. This is how it is now. And they also are just at that age level where they can relate to. And, you know, Brandon, one little neat, interesting little thread I want to connect here. I do find it odd that I go visit DJ Daniel in Milledgeville. He knows I'm coming. We have to set up an interview. I don't ever want to paparazzi any recruit.
Right.
And he starts working out, and then he changes into some Georgia gear.
How about that?
I don't really know what you guys can extrapolate from that, what you will, but it's the same thing that Lewis Seen did. I show up, Lewis Seen shows up in a pair of Georgia shorts. I'm like, dude, I didn't ask you to do that. I don't need any sort of hyperbole for my
There's
photo.
no dress code for a Jeff Sintel interview, after all.
There's no dress code, and they just wanted to wear the G out of their own volition. So, and you want to look for insidery things, or what's that magic potion, or what's that secret thread? I know you like to look through.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Brandon goes CSI sometimes with interviews, and he says, "Okay, that quote right there tells me he's going here,
right,
or he's not going here."
I do enjoy doing that,
but when guys start showing up in Georgia gear unprompted for the interview, that just shows me that the national brand of Georgia is very strong.
All right, here's what's still to come today on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Jeff on the Dog Nation Forum, and if you've not visited the Dog Nation Forum, this is something that you're really going to want to spend some time with. Forum.dognation.com. Jeff previewed the upcoming episode. Y'all had some fun at my expense, which I loved. Some captioned the photo contest involving my big fat face. But you also put some questions for our show in there. Jeff and I are both going to read some of those before we're done. We're going to take a lot of your comments on both Facebook and YouTube here as well, as we kind of dive into everything that you want to hear and know about on Before the Hedges. And of course, we'll do that every Wednesday right here during this 3 p.m. hour on the Dog Nation video channel. By the way, somebody also asked a moment ago about the show being on YouTube. Yes, the show will be on YouTube, which is actually kind of a nice addition for the people that have watched you on Wednesday nights in the past on your Wednesday Night Live broadcast. That was only available on Facebook, is that right? But now you're available on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter all at the same time, presented by Kroger, which is a really cool thing.
Sometimes for the non-Facebook lane, I would, when I got enough requests, I would embed the post from Facebook inside the Sintel's Intel every day. So maybe the non-Facebook crowd could also see what we're talking about. But now, man, when you tether up with this guy right here, the Daily Llama, as I called him earlier in the show, you go worldwide when you hang with Brandon Adams now.
Well, speaking of going worldwide, if Georgia goes all the way to the top here in the future, one of the guys that may help the Dogs get there is one of the most recent commits to the program, a guy you've gotten to know, introduced to us. His name is Zion Logue. He's in the fold now, and he was telling Jeff Sintel what it is that he likes about UGA, and Georgia fans get a chance to see what they're going to like about Logue. Take a look at this.
All right, Zion, we're here at your, your cradle of football where you first started playing. What does this field mean to you right now?
I mean, this is where it all started for me. I played from here before I was 7 years old. When I first started playing football. This field is everything to me.
What was the reason why you chose the Bulldogs, and how good of a fit is it right now?
The fit is very good for me. It's because when I went down to camp, I already felt like I was a part of the family. Coach Trey Squad took me in with open arms. Coach Kirby Smart took me in with open arms. So I'm just taking it all as a blessing. I'm grateful to have him. That's my commitment to it.
How do you feel about the future in the school you chose, and what do you think about the upside of going to go play at Georgia?
Georgia is a great program. I feel like we can really win some championships there. So that's the reason I picked them.
Tell me about how Kirby and Trey recruited you. What stands out to you about the way they did it?
I think they got in touch with me on a Monday, and they asked me could I come down there on a Tuesday. So we made everything in our power to get down there for camp, and ever since that day, it's been running and rolling.
Did you know after that camp that Georgia was going to be in it big for you?
Yes, I did.
Why?
It's Georgia. You can't really turn them down. So
ultimately, can you put your finger on one reason why it was red and black in the end?
It felt like a family. That's the biggest thing for me. Is it a family that can I see myself there for 4 to 5 years?
You will be committed. Do you plan to take any other officials? Is that still up in the air?
That's still up in the air. I don't know if I'm going to take them yet.
And will you be able to enroll early?
No. Mom wants me to stay all 4 years.
Which people in your life have been very influential in getting you to this point of your career?
Number one, God, then my mom, my grandmother, my father, my great-grandmother, my late uncle, my late great-grandmother. My head football coach now, Coach Chuck Gentry, the whole Lebanon football staff. My basketball coach, Coach McDowell, Jim McDowell. That's it. That's almost everybody.
What does your mom mean to you?
Man, that's my rock. She's everything for me. She's everything in my life. She always will be.
What kind of player is that program, the Georgia program, getting? What are the fans going to have to get used to when they watch you play?
Get ready for a high energized player. I can just say that.
How did that camp go? When they started working with you, what do you remember Coach Scott and Coach Smart telling you after that camp visit?
Yeah, I was a great player, and they liked the way I played and moved, and they really just loved me.
Coach, what athletically, fans are going to see the size and they're going to see all the measurables. What athletically stands out about Zion beyond just 6'5.5" now and about 290 pounds?
Hey, just a very athletic kid. A lot of folks didn't know Zion used to play quarterback. He played first base in baseball. He's played anywhere from the 3 to the 4 in basketball. Just a very gifted, athletic kid that can move his feet and is very gifted.
How far could he throw the football when he was a middle school quarterback, and how far can he throw it now?
He probably could throw it 45, 50 yards, probably middle school. I bet he throws it 60, 65 right now.
Wow. Coach, what kind of young man and person is this guy?
First class kid, very respectful. Yes sir, no sir. Gonna do things the right way. Not gonna take shortcuts. Don't want to let nobody down. Very passionate about what he's doing. Very, very big on relationships, man. He's very big on relationships.
So great stuff there, getting a chance to know Zion Logue a little bit better. And how much fun is that for you to kind of dive into a guy like Logue in his own turf, in his own community where he feels comfortable, learning about not just a player but where he comes from?
I think that's basically, Brandon, why I do this. I'm going to be able, the fact that I cover University of Georgia recruiting, to talk about the nation's X this or the 5-star here now or high 4-star here. That gets repetitive after a while, but what doesn't get repetitive is meeting a guy like Zion. And I know the staff at Georgia would probably raise an eyebrow about that 3-star rating and how the fact that he's the lowest rated recruit on the Georgia board for 2019. But got to remember, a lot of those evaluations came when he was about 245. Now he's about 295 right now. Still moves the same as he did. He's going to play some tight end as well for his Lebanon, Tennessee high school team as well. And one little nugget you get there as well. Zion comes from a family with some college football DNA. It'll come up in a later Dog Nation story, but I think he's got 4 other family members that have played college football recently. And that's a good sign when you're looking about projection to the next level.
Can I congratulate you on the correct pronunciation of Lebanon? You know, if you're a citizen of the world, you say Lebanon. If you're a son of the South, you say Lebanon. I grew up near some Lebanon stuff in Hall County. Lebanon, yeah.
Well, I mean, all I got to say here is hopefully we're still considered sons of the South.
That's exactly right.
And, we work in a building. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution brand is still very strong. And I don't know about you, but I try to think about covering Dixie like the Dew every time I go out and try to work a story.
All right, that's Jeff Sentell. He's going to be giving away his Before the Hedges How About Them Groceries Kroger gift card coming up in just a moment. I also promised we'd read some comments from our forum. People have been submitting questions and comments at forum.dognation.com. I want to read here from MacDog15, Jeff, because I thought this was very good. He says about himself, I was very comfortable with our chance with Nakobe Dean. That's the 5-star linebacker from Mississippi. But MacDog goes on to say, but for some reason, they seem to be dwindling after Tresman Marshall's commitment, along with Rian Davis. You can also add Nolan Smith and J.D. Bertrand into this, too. He says, realistically, what do you think our chances are of landing Nakobe Dean? Jeff, how about that, given what Georgia's already done at the linebacker position, the high-profile miss, if you want to say that, about Owen Popo early in the spring, where do things stand between the Dogs and Dean?
Well, Dean takes his visits, and he's a very intelligent young man. His father is a physician out of Mississippi, and he's going to wait a long time before he makes his final recruiting decision. Georgia still getting an official. Georgia's still going to get one of those later officials, perhaps even still the last official for Nakobe Dean. And maybe the headlines are kind of reducing a little bit of the buzz down there for Nakobe Dean. Dan Lanning, I know, is a guy that has recruited Nakobe Dean heavily. And the family did take a very interesting recent visit to Florida State. And the mother of Nakobe Dean did really connect well with Willie Taggart at FSU. And that's his visit right now that's going to resonate a little bit with that family, I believe. But sometimes all those visit highs wear off. And I think if you look at Georgia, and they have to basically pitch the future of their program and compare it to the future of the program at Florida State. I think that's still an enviable head-to-head for the Bulldogs right now. Wait and see Nakobe Dean, but I will say this, because it's a very good question. If I had to sit there and think about the most likely additional five-star for Georgia in the class of 2019, how Georgia gets to 6 or how Georgia gets to 7, Nakobe Dean is still right at the top of my list when you think about the last remaining potential 5 stars in the class for Georgia.
All right, we got to get ready to wrap up here. Jeff, I know you got some forum stuff that you want to read. We're also going to do our giveaway here. I thought Charles Felder had a great comment on our Facebook comment section. Says, BA and Jeff, how about we take one recruit per week so to make him the recruit of the week and kind of dive deep and get to know him a little bit. And in some form or fashion, I think that Jeff would say that's one of his real visions for this show is like we just saw there with Zion Logue, like we saw a little earlier from a would-be potential commit to University of Georgia, DJ Daniel. Those kind of introspective interviews, I know that's a big part of what you want to bring to the table here each week on Before the Hedges, is it not?
Yeah, we're going to try to do a lot of things with the program, and this is the format. I've got the Don King of Dog Nation right here, the Carnival Barker, the Hype Man or whatever.
Only in America.
And we're going to try and do a lot of things with this format. I think it's a great chance to – we've got one little gem of an idea that's way up that sleeve. I know my eventual vision for this program is to one day have a commitment to the University of Georgia happen here on this very live stream. Those are also in the works as well. But I will say this, it gives us a lot of time to maybe tape an interview, maybe sometimes do a Skype interview during a holiday week or holiday break or something else like that. Gives us a lot of chance to, show more than game film, but also show that game film as well. Unique habits of the recruits sometimes, and we do enjoy bringing them to you.
Are you got anything with the forum you want to read here?
Well, first of all, there are some knee slappers in the forum.
Yeah, y'all got to go see this thread. In fact, I'm going to sort of break the rule here. If you go to this forum thing, you can see all the pictures that Jeff put of me in there. People having a very good time at my expense. It's like a whole photo gallery of me, which is sort of a odd thing to see there, but it's a lot of fun. And I haven't had a chance to respond, but I love reading what many of you've sort of put in there in terms of your own kind of captions for some of my fairly humorous pictures over the years.
First of all, these are Brandon's glamour shots. A couple of these are, but I'm going to again tip the Dog Nation cap to a few Photoshop 5 stars.
Yeah, I like this one a lot.
And I know, here's what I'm going to do.
You got to go to the forum to see these, forum.dognation.com.
This is a shoot from the hip decision. Brandon and I, I'm going to break protocol here a little bit.
Wow, this is totally unplanned, completely unorthodox.
The How About Them Groceries trivia card contest was going to go to the best and most incredible question of the night or the afternoon, but I think this still qualifies as communication because it was on our forum. And I've got 2 nominees, and I want you guys to vote, and we will break the tie via the votes. We've got Brandon right here. Somebody has photoshopped him eating gator. And he hasn't seen this, so you will see raw Brandon Adams guffaws happening right here. But we got Brandon right here eating a pizza as well. And my honorable, those are our top 2, so vote on pizza or gator. But we also have one right here titled Honorable Mention, What is Wrong with UGA Recruiting? And we've got Brandon with a belly laugh right there as well.
Yeah.
You remember where that was from, right? That was the Marlowe's Dog Nation Live.
I do remember one of our great nights there.
So quick, we're gonna shoot from the hip here. Pizza or eating gator? Vote right now on the stream, and the person who gets the most votes, the gator Photoshop edit or the pizza Photoshop edit, Whoever gets the most votes on the rest of this stream is going to get the $50 gift card. How about them groceries from Kroger?
Jeff will tweet out the winner a little bit later on. We appreciate you being with us here this afternoon. Also, thanks for Kroger for making it all possible as well. Don't forget they got a great offer for you coming up this weekend, Friday and Saturday. You can get 10-pack of Capri Suns, 8-pack of Go-Gurts for just 99 cents. Coupon can be downloaded today. Redeem it in stores coming up this Friday and Saturday. If you've got a 6-year-old like I do and a 3-year-old like I do, that is a great way to pack those back-to-school lunches. And thanks for being a part of that with us. All right, we're back again next Wednesday afternoon. A lot of your recruiting questions we'll answer. More fun and surprises. Just like tonight, Jeff will be unveiling some content never before seen anywhere else. It's going to be a big part of our Wednesdays. We appreciate you making it a part of yours. Thanks for being here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. For Jeff Sintel, I'm Brandon Adams saying see you again next week on our program. Read the Sintel Intel tomorrow morning, and I'll see you live at 10 for Dog Nation Daily as well. Y'all have a great afternoon, everybody.